Hi there, my name is Zach Johnson, and today we are going to be, or actually you're going to be watching me demonstrate how to DJ using Ableton Live. This is great for beginners and even on the intermediate level. If you do have some experience with DJing in Ableton, this might be a good refresher for you. Also, maybe there's some things in here that you haven't really discovered yet for yourself that you could also learn about. And so what I'm going to do right now is actually I'm going to do a little bit of DJing, and then I'm going to walk you through the process. So again, this is for beginners, for introductory students that are wanting to learn about the live side of using Ableton Live in the session view, and actually kind of what separates Ableton from other digital audio workstations. Okay, so here we go.
So we back again. We do it like this. So we back again. We do it like this. So we back again. We do it like this. So we back. So we back again. We do it like this. With the new thing. We do it like this. So we back again. We do it like this. With the new thing. Like this, so we back again. Like this, like this, like this. Face the funk, face the funk, face the what's the new thing?
They appreciate your hair, Jones, and playing this for you know that he's a sinner. I saw his stash, oh Lord, with peace. Put a blessing on, brother and boy. We appreciate you too. Hit that note again, let me see if that's still right. From $100,000 house I get old. Y'all, let's go home. Let's get together, let's get your gap here. Yeah. No, you don't need to wrestle no more. Oh Lord, we call Harold Jones and he's drugs. Get your girl for him one time. Yeah.
So if you're wondering what you're tuning into right now, demonstrating how to DJ live in Ableton. This is a hybrid of using some MIDI capabilities on my MIDI hardware device, but then also showing you how you can also just use your laptop to DJ. Okay, so in a moment here, I'm going to walk you through the process, but I just wanted to give you a quick demo on how to DJ with Ableton. Okay, so stick around and I'll go through the process. All right. So again, this was just a quick demonstration on how you could DJ live in real time using Ableton Live. Hence why Ableton, the company, calls it live. So I wanted to give you a demonstration. Again, this is just a quick demonstration on how you could DJ using Ableton Live. And now I'm going to walk you through the process. Okay, so you got just a sneak peek of this. But I want to show you how you can make a DJ template, a custom template just for your tracks. Maybe if you wanted to do a DJ set of other people's music, maybe if you wanted to, after you produce your own songs and you want to figure out a way to perform with them live, how you could set that up using a custom DJ template. So I'm going to walk you through that. And then I'm going to walk you through 8 steps here, 8 steps including organizing your songs by tempo and key if possible, how you should organize your tracks once you decide you want to put a DJ set together. We're going to briefly go over warping and warp modes and which warp modes you should select, and some things to watch out when it comes to warping. And then I'm going to talk about how you can set up your sends and returns and even make some custom ones for adding effects. And then also the difference between using sends and effects for your decks or your tracks, but then also if you wanted to put effects right on the tracks themselves, which ones I recommend. Talking about the importance of having a limiter on your master and why that's essential. How to actually access the crossfader when you want to maybe transition from one song to the next, how you can actually blend these in a smooth manner, in a professional manner. And then also if you wanted to record your sets. So let's say you're doing a live stream like this, what I'm showing you right now, the demonstration on Twitch, or if you are doing a show or a concert and you want to record your set and maybe upload it later to something like SoundCloud or Spotify, I'll show you that process. And then getting into some more customization, some more advanced things like inserting additional scenes for if you want to set up any sort of follow actions, which I was demonstrating earlier here, if you want to create your own custom loops and how you can trigger those back and forth between different clips in Ableton. And then lastly, customization when it comes to MIDI mapping your controllers. So the exercise or the demonstration that I gave earlier, I was kind of a hybrid setup. I'm literally DJing using my Complete Control MIDI keyboard. Yes, I'm actually using a piano keyboard for DJing. Some of you might have access to MIDI controllers that are more designed for Ableton, like maybe a push 1 or a push 2, the Akai series. There's a lot of different step sequencer controllers that you can use for DJing, but I purposely wanted to show you how you could still DJ even with the bare minimum. And so again, a hybrid between my Complete Control keyboard by Native Instruments and actually just using my mouse and my laptop keyboard. So yeah, so rest assured, even if you don't have the latest and greatest hardware gear, you can still literally DJ using just your computer. So, okay, so let's go through this process here and let me show you exactly how I set this up. And yeah, and by the way, oh, side note, if you, because this is being streamed right now, if you happen to be watching, head over to Garnish Music on our YouTube page, and you can actually ask me questions. So for the next 45 minutes, if you have any questions for me, I will be checking the chat in the YouTube channel page here for Garnish. So if you have any questions for me in regards to how I set things up, feel free to ask me questions, and I'll try to get to them as soon as possible. But yeah, so again, for the next 45 minutes, just demonstrating how I put this DJ set together. Okay, so first things first, you're going to need songs, right? And there's a lot of different resources for downloading music. If you're using your own music, that's a great place to start. But if you are going to be putting a DJ set together, there's lots of different DJ pools. I'm not going to get into that as much, but there's tons of resources on the Garnish on our Garnish website, and I'll be giving you a link to that in a moment here. Or actually towards the end of this video, I'll give you more information on our DJ program, but then also the Ableton program and resources. So yes, once you find some songs that you want to download, you're going to want to put them into tracks. Okay. And so you can see here, I have this track that I renamed, an audio track I renamed it Deck A, and then a secondary track called Deck B. Now, the reason why I'm calling it Deck A and Deck B, because for those of you who are familiar in the DJ world, typically when you have a DJ setup, you have either 2 turntables or maybe 2 controllers with jog wheels or 2 CDJs with a mixer in between. So to give it more of or for it to make more sense as like a DJ setup, I recommend having at least 2 decks, and for each deck on Deck A have an X amount of songs, and then on Deck B have an X amount of songs. So depending on how long your set is going to be, whether it's 20 minutes, 30 minutes, or an hour. In this case, I set this up so it's only a 15-minute set. That's why you only see so many clips here, but you can see that you can keep adding clips after clips after clips. And what do I mean when I refer to clips? For those of you who might be new to Ableton, that these are the actual songs. Okay, so the songs, but when you're looking at the audio tracks here, you're actually looking at them as Ableton clips. Okay. So when you want to rename your tracks, when you first load songs in, okay, so if you hit Command T, you might be loading in an audio track, and ideally when I'm loading songs in, I might have an extra track loaded in, and I put all the songs in here. I arrange them by tempo and by key. If you can harmonically match your songs, it's recommended. Unfortunately, Ableton does not have a key detection device unless you're looking into some Max for Live audio effects. But ideally, you would use maybe something like Mixing Key, which is a third-party software that actually will give you not only the tempo, but will give you the key based off a system called the Camelot wheel. And for those of you who are wondering about Mixing Key, actually, if you do sign up for a DJing course here at Garnish or an Ableton course, DJing or Ableton, we have a partnership with Mixing Key, and we can honor educational discounts. So just food for thought there. But as I load these tracks in, you'll see that I have them these tracks renamed, and I hit Command R and I named this one Deck A, and then I hit Command R in this one and renamed it Deck B. Okay, so once I get my tracks loaded in, I like to rename them with the tempo, which you can see here, and then with the Camelot system, this track is 11A. So in Mixing Key, you have tracks that's based in a numeric value from 1 to 12, and each number represents a actual key that your song might be in. So when I'm talking about key, I mean songs that are harmonically pleasing. So for example, I know that this song that's called Revival is in the key of E minor, and this track called Grace is also in the key of E minor. So harmonically, these tracks will work well together, regardless of the tempo. The tempos, I try to find tempos that are roughly within 10 beats per minute apart, because once you start to stretch past that, if you're trying to do a true DJ set in the sense that you're not trying to modulate or change the audio files too much, you want to keep them somewhere around the ballpark of the original tempo. I'd say no more or less than 10 beats per minute apart. But because these tracks are very close in tempo, they are also close in key, and that's why I intentionally group these two songs together so they harmonically match each other and don't sound too dissonant. So the cool thing about using Mixing Key and having tracks that maybe they're not necessarily in the same key, but they are at least the dominant or subdominant, meaning that they are closely related in key, so they should work together. That's why I start this track called Cream that blended earlier into Grace, which is in 9A. So from 11A to 9A is a jump. It's only one step of a jump, but it works well. Okay. So once you get your tracks loaded in, try to find the songs that are roughly around the same tempo, and then try to find songs that are roughly around the same key if you have that opportunity. Worst case, you might want to test your set to make sure the songs sound good together before. If you don't have something like mixing key, you can use your ears, the old school way, to hear if something is harmonically pleasing or not. Okay, but one thing that I did with this set that's a little bit different is, if you look here on deck A, okay, I have these 3 loops. I renamed them loop 1, loop plus 12, and loop rev. And these 3 loops are actually, I customized these because they're actually just shorter durations of the original song called Cream, but I'm using something called follow actions to, if you ever want to do some kind of hybrid remixing on the fly, or if you wanted to maybe chop up and modulate the original file and play around with it, do some glitchy kind of stuff, follow actions is a great way to do that. And I'll demonstrate in a moment how this works. But one of the most important things, once you get your tracks loaded in and you rename them, staying organized is key here, by tempo and key. The next thing you're going to want to do is make sure that your tracks have been warped correctly. What do I mean by that? That Ableton is actually reading the tracks correctly by tempo. So if this were an Ableton class, like if you actually were in a live session with us, whether that's through our Zoom classes that we do or in-person classes, we do a whole series on all the different warp modes and how to warp tracks correctly. This right now, I'm not going to really dive too heavy into warping, but it's important to note that you should definitely have warping activated. If your tracks are not activated with warp, you're going to get into trouble, especially when you're trying to match tempos together. So that's really important. And under this, you'll see that you have different warp modes. There's beats, tones, textures, repitch, complex, and complex pro. They all have their strengths and weaknesses. There's some really creative things that you can do in beats mode, same with repitch and texture and tones mode. But when it comes to full complex audio waveforms, meaning actual full songs that have either vocals or chords, harmonies, drums, rhythm, bass, etc., it's recommended that you set all of your tracks to complex pro mode. Okay, so complex pro mode, with the expense of running your CPU a little bit hotter, it's not that big of a deal. But if you want to preserve the actual quality as much as you can, because as soon as you activate warp, what the warp engine does, it adds a little bit of compression, especially when you start adding warp markers. But if you leave it in complex pro, it will sound as close to the original as possible when you're doing a live DJ set. In this case, I wanted to make sure these tracks kept their key, and if I did decide to change the tempo, the key would not shift. It would stay in its original form. Okay, so yeah, make sure all of your tracks are warped correctly, and you have them in what's called complex pro mode. And for what it's worth too, just one kind of pointer I can suggest and give you is when you are warping your tracks, make sure you find the downbeat. Okay, and then your clue into knowing if you've actually matched the correct tempo or not is also looking at your segment BPM. A lot of times when people are starting out using Ableton Live, they assume that the master tempo up here is what's in line with what's happening with the original segment BPM. That's what this is here. So your segment BPM is not necessarily meant to match what's happening in the master tempo. The master tempo is only for outputting playback. So the cool thing is, once you get your tracks warped in real time, you can do things like this, where if I come over to the scene section, I can play both of these tracks at once. Okay. and I can adjust the tempo accordingly, and they will stay synced together. And how do I know these tracks have been warped correctly? Other than setting this up myself and knowing from just doing this from practice. The more you practice this, the better and the more efficient you will get at warping. But also using the metronome to see if the metronome click matches with the actual beat of the down beats that you're hearing in this 4/4 time signature.
Like this. With the new thing.
Okay.
Like this. So we rock it.
Okay, so
Like this.
even though I'm playing both of these at once and I'm playing them at both different tempos, this one's originally 122, this one's 122, but the master is outputting at 120. But if you look at my segment BPM, it says 122. Okay, so that's important that you do that. Warping and warp modes, getting your tracks synced to Ableton, and then running them in Complex Pro. Right, next. Sends and returns, okay, for effects. So if you notice earlier when I was doing this live demonstration, you might have seen me, tweaking my elbows, poking my elbows, and doing this kind of action. It wasn't to necessarily look cool, okay? So a lot of times people think that maybe is the DJ really doing something when he's kind of doing this motion? The answer is yes, okay? Well, they should be. And in that case, I actually am running these sends here. Okay, so this send A is going to this return track, which is just a standard Ableton reverb. And then send B is delay. So send B is going to this delay. And what that allows me to do with both decks, by the way, simultaneously, I can be running this. I can be adding effects in real time. And I have this MIDI map to my keyboard, but really what it sounds like, if you wanted to see, if I hit play here, okay.
Like this. Like this.
Okay.
So we rock it. Like this. Like with the new thing. Like this.
Okay. So I just demonstrated how there's a reverb send. The send A is going to reverb A, and then on B we have delay. Okay, so again, if you're trying to, when is a good time to use effects? I love using effects when I hear claps coming in, or when I hear a vocal hit, or maybe the part of the song where it actually breaks down into either the bridge or the breakdown, depending which genre you're mixing in. But also it's great for transition. So sometimes I'll use reverb to wash out a signal, mixing and blending into the next track. Okay. And the cool thing is that even though this is, again, just a basic kind of setup, but you can customize this later. So if you wanted to, hey, reverb and delay are cool on their own, but if I wanted to add more returns and more sends, you can do that. And the key command is Option Command T. Okay, you can also right click in here to add a return track. And in this return track, Ableton, by the way, Ableton 11, Ableton Live 11, they actually introduced some more effects in here. They're really cool. Just different types of delays that you can try out, different modulators, different pitch and modulation. So one of my favorites is using the phaser flanger combination, and if I want, I could go ahead and just drag and drop that right onto a return track, and then automatically it's set to C send. So again, if I'm playing something like this track, for example, okay, I can send it to sending it right to this phaser flanger. And also the other cool thing is that you can customize these sends and returns. What do I mean by that? So let's say I like this phaser flanger, but let's combine it with something like vocoder. Yeah, so you can actually stack more than one effect into a return and send track. So this is actually what makes part of what makes DJing in Ableton really exciting and really fun. And this is not a knock on other DJ softwares, because if you're DJing with Serato and Rekordbox and Tractor, those are wonderful programs. But because Ableton is first and foremost a digital audio workstation, it's not just for DJing live, it's for producing as well. So this is kind of one of the things I think Ableton has up on other DJing software programs. DJing software programs strictly just for DJing, whereas this is a hybrid setup, and you can definitely do some crazy customizations here. Crazy. Why did I say crazy? I mean, you can really just get experimental here, and you can make it crazy if you want in a fun way, right? But anyways, so returns and sends is a great way to just send your signal, which is either deck A or deck B, into one of these sends, whether it's reverb, delay, and you could do more than one at a time. I could send A and B at the same time, maybe mix that with C. And what you're really looking at here, think of this as like a dry wet knob. So from the very beginning, 0%, and then if I send it all the way up, that's 100%. So 100% of the signal is going into the return track, which then in theory is going to the master channel outputting. Okay, the one thing I'll say though to be careful or watch out for is when you're using effects, especially like reverbs and delays, be careful how much you output, how much you send. Here's a tip for you: less is more when it comes to effects when DJing, because remember that a lot of times these effects can add actual extra amplitude, and that can cause distortion. It can actually, if you send too much of the signal going into the return track and then outputting to the master, that can actually cause some unwanted clipping and distortion, and also it can make the track itself seem louder than it really is tended to be. Like the actual effect can be louder than the song itself. So you want to watch out for that. If you're wondering what's kind of the cutoff, where do I like to cut things off? It depends, but on the safe side, on the conservative side, I would say no more than, if you're thinking this as like a clock, you could say like 3 p.m., maybe like 75% is the max I would do for most of these effects. Once in a while though, if I am going to crank it all the way to 100%, I don't hang out there too long. Meaning that if I'm going to bring an effect all the way up 100%, I will try to only do that for a short amount of time, and then dial it quickly back to the beginning. Okay, you have to experiment with these things, guys, and really I think one of the great things about DJing in Ableton is recording your sets, and I'll talk about that in a moment. But it's actually a wonderful way to self-reflect and critique your own set. So if you're not sure how much effect is being applied, do a quick recording, and then you can listen back and see like, oh, that either sounded great or did not sound great, and I need to maybe dial these things and tweak them later. But let's keep moving on here. So also you might have noticed that I was using what sounds like a low pass filter, and again I'll demonstrate. So if I'm playing this track here, okay, this is a low pass filter, cutting all the high frequencies out. Okay, it's definitely a classic way to mix and DJ. And you can not just, it's not limited to low pass filters, high pass filters, band pass filters if you want, notch filters, if you want to get a little more creative. But really, if you notice, the main difference here between using the sends and returns for effects, this low pass filter is actually printed right on deck A, and the same goes for deck B. The reason why I chose that is because for definitely more post fader effects like reverb, because even with the reverb send, if the signal does stop, you can actually hear the tail end of the reverb. But with this type of effect, more of a pre-fader type effect, I use the auto filter. Literally, if I want to cut a signal out and make it dry, I will put the auto filter on deck A and deck B. And again, you can customize this, because one thing you learn in our Ableton classes, if this were an Ableton class in person, we talk about all the different effects and ones that will sound good, or good, giving you good examples of like this, for example, using an auto filter right on the actual track itself versus using a send type of track like a reverb or a delay. But again, you can customize this, meaning I can have more than one effect here. If I really wanted to, maybe add some gate messaging or some compression to my tracks, I could stamp that, print that right on deck A and deck B. Okay. And also something else to just side note that it does matter which effects go in which section, meaning that like the actual serial mode. Sorry, had a heart. My tongue got twisted there. Meaning that if I decide to put reverb after the auto filter, and if it's low passing like this, what's outputting is the low pass signal, and then it's going to go to the reverb. But if I have reverb first, the reverb is going to pass through and then go into the auto filter and then output from there. So again, which decision is best for you? You have to experiment and see. Not all effects will be that obvious when you input one effect into the other, but it does technically make a difference on how you set these things up. So it's just a side note there for you to keep that in mind. By the way, I usually don't put reverbs on my decks. I usually, again, just use those for the return tracks, the returns and sends. Okay, moving on here, the crossfader. This is key. This is very important that you understand how to use the crossfader. So I actually have the crossfader mapped, and again, I'll show you how I map these things. But if you look over here on the bottom right hand side, you see how this is moving back and forth. Again, that's because I have it mapped to my keyboard, but really this crossfader allows me to access what I would call deck A and deck B. So if you're not seeing that, okay, you have to access the panel right here. This is the show hide crossfader section, this little X symbol. It's probably hard to see on my screen, but check out your Ableton. You should see this as well. So you hit this X button right here, and this will open up, okay, not only the crossfader, but right here you'll have an option to select between decks A and deck B. So really what that's doing is splitting the signal of these two decks, and that's why I renamed this one deck A and decks B. You can customize this how you want, but make sure you highlight when you first activate this. Highlight so this one will only play on deck A, which is all the way to the left here, and then this one is selected so it's only going to play on deck B. Now when I have the crossfader in the middle, you'll hear both signals, but when I start to move it to the left, the deck B would start to fade out. And then if you go all the way to the left, you're only hearing deck A exclusively. So let me just demonstrate that so you can see exactly what I'm talking about. If I go ahead and bring it all the way over to deck A, and even if I decide to, use a scene like this and hit play on both of these at the same time, you're only going to hear, okay, you're only hearing deck A right now. But check this out. So I'm going to open up the filter.
Like this. What's the new thing? Like this. So we rock again. Like this. What's the new thing?
Okay, and right now you're hearing both tracks playing at the same time. I just low passed both of them, but it's the crossfader's right in the middle.
Like this. So we rock again. Like this.
And if I keep moving the crossfader to the right, it's going to inevitably end up just only playing deck B. Okay. And so you can see here, if you look at deck B, the signal that's coming through is only on deck B. And let me move it back to deck A. Okay. So you can see there how both of these decks are being played at the same time. Even though they might be playing at the same time, that doesn't necessarily mean you're going to hear both of them at the same time. And that's because of this crossfader. So the crossfader, so again, for those of you who have experience DJing using DJing hardware, meaning like an actual mixer, there's something called a crossfader where you can cross between the two signals, okay? And literally from deck A will turn off deck B, and then if you move it over to deck B, that will turn off deck A, but if you put it right in the middle, you could have them playing both at the same time, aka mixing two songs together, okay? So yeah, that's a really important understanding the crossfader A-B mixing control. And again, right here, this is where you can access it. And even if I turn off X, if I remember my MIDI mapping, I don't need this on all the time. I can go ahead and collapse this if I don't want to look at it anymore. Okay. So the other thing that I want to point out that's really important is if you go to your master channel, you'll notice that I have or my master channel, sorry, not your master channel, but my master channel has what's called a limiter. Okay, this is what's technically a brick wall limiter, and it's recommended, especially if you're going to be doing DJ sets and you're going to be recording a set using songs that have already been mastered. Okay, something that you have to watch out for is what we call clipping or digital distortion, digital clipping, and that's where the signal in the master channel will become will turn red. So if you put a limiter, and by the way, the limiter is accessed if you look up in Ableton. It's just in your audio effects. So here, a quick way to find this, Command F, and just type in limiter. Okay, the limiter is a great way to help without having any sort of digital clipping. Because let me just demonstrate. If I hit play on both of these tracks at the same time, oh, hold on. Okay, and watch. If I turn the limiter off, watch this. Yeah, you see my master? Look at my master turning red. And then when I turn the limiter back on, the tracks are no longer clipping. So how's that working? The limiter, basically being a brick wall compressor, is making sure nothing goes past the ceiling mark. Okay, it's not allowing it to punch through and causing clipping. So this will save you, especially if you're doing a live show and you're playing on a big stage. Yeah, you don't want to blow the speakers. You don't want to blow your eardrums. You don't want to blow your headphones. This limiter will help you make sure that you don't do that, okay? So be careful of that. You can still cause distortion, but at least you won't blow your speaker system. Because in Ableton, being that it's a digital audio workstation, yes, you could be sending signals that can get quite loud. So you want to be careful with that, okay? So definitely recommend having a limiter. Now, you don't have to use Ableton's limiter. There's different types of limiters out there, third-party ones, but Ableton's limiter is, suffice it to say that this would be completely fine. This one works well in Ableton, okay? So next, recording your set. Now, how do you record your set? Earlier, I was demonstrating how to play tracks, but what I like to do, so I can maybe either, if I end up loving the set that I did at a show or live on stage or even my home bedroom studio, I want to record a set and then share it with the world. It's very easy to do, and this is what happens when you go to start playing your songs. Well, before you start playing your songs, you can come up here and just hit record, okay? And then I'll start playing my set. Let me just demonstrate real quick.
Like this with the new thing. So we back again. So we back with the new thing. Like this. So we back again. Like this.
Okay. So quickly, just kind of demonstrating how I could record my set. But once you hit record, you can hit stop. And then if you hit tab on your keyboard, you can come over here and you can actually access and see your set being recorded, okay? So you have to be careful though. One thing that I forgot to do is making sure that I'm back in arrangement view. My set actually technically didn't record, so you need to be careful with this. But actually, no, it did record. I'm sorry. Yes, for a second there, I panicked. I was like, "Woo! I forgot to hit record." No, I did hit record. It recorded it over here. So that's not ideal. But so yes, we all make mistakes. Okay, so I totally screwed that up. This is why it's exciting to record live, guys. Very, very fun to record live because you never know what's gonna happen when we're live. Okay, we're not on like a 2-minute delay where I can fix things. But the good lesson here, make sure you start at the beginning. Okay, so this is the arrangement view. This is where you would see your recorded set. So let me just demonstrate this one more time, but do it correctly, okay? Yeah, I'm seeing some comments here. Oh, wow, very different to CDJs. It is different to CDJs, right? Yeah, it is. And by the way, this is not to replace something like CDJs. It's just another way to approach this, okay? Yes. Yep. SF Garnish Music School. Shout out SF's Garnish Music School. I like how you can group tracks on deck A and deck B in Ableton and create some very custom sounds. Yes. So SF Garnish Music School is bringing up a very awesome point here. This is only the beginning when it comes to DJing in Ableton Live. And being that there's a very kind of basic setup, the customization never ends. And that's why it's actually really fun to DJ in Ableton Live as well. So I still love DJing on CDJs. I still love DJing on vinyl, definitely old school. I still have a vinyl collection with my Technique 1200s, but it's just a different approach, you know, hybrid digital audio workstation production mixed with DJing. Super fun program. But okay, so let me just demonstrate this one more time and make sure I get this so it plays at the beginning. But it's really easy. Like I said, it's really easy to record in Ableton Live. And if you wanted to record your set, it's simply just start recording, okay? And then start playing your tracks if they actually play. And then let me open up my crossfader here.
Like this. So we back again. Like this.
Okay.
With the new thing. Like this. So we back again. Like this. With the new thing. Like this. So we back. Like this. So we back. Like this. So we back.
Okay. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and stop this. Again, just quick little demonstration of mixing these things together. Okay. And then so now when I go back, hit tab to go back to the arrangement, you can see the beginning of my set recorded here. And it will include even the follow actions that I did. And the nice thing is too, everyone, so if you wanted to actually start recording live sets, you can always edit your sets later. Okay, so that's one of the other great things to just recording in Ableton Live and DJing, but also that the fact that it's a digital audio workstation. Whereas sometimes, you know, if you're using some other DJ software programs that don't have that customization of going back and editing your sets, in Ableton, you can do that, okay? So again, if this were a in-person class, or if you were signed up for one of our classes over the internet via Zoom, we would walk through this process a little bit more. But because we're only here for 1 hour, I'm not gonna really dive into that right now, but at least to get you started and get you going, this should be plenty. Okay, so I'm gonna go ahead and just delete this. I'm just gonna come back over here because there's a couple more things I wanna get through with you. And the next is inserting scenes to create loops. Okay, so if you look down over here, you'll see that I have this one track called Portray, okay? Portray My Heart. And below that, I have Portray My Heart again, just the color's a little bit different. And it says loop, all caps. Okay, that's to let me know that I actually have a loop here. So I created a copy of this. But how did I create this copy? The cool thing is in Ableton is that it's really easy to create carbon copies by holding down the Option key and then just clicking and dragging down. But what I did with this Betray My Heart track is I said, look, I don't necessarily want to play the entire track all the way to the end, especially for demonstration purposes. But I created a section of it where I just made a 8-bar loop. So if I wanted to start playing the next track with this track, what I could do is hit play on this song. And then when I'm ready, okay, I can quickly just hit this loop right here and then jump into it. And no matter what, until I hit stop, it will just keep looping, okay? So that was kind of, you know, something that you might have not realized earlier when I was demonstrating, that this was just a loop, but now that you can see it here, so that allows me to start playing the next track, okay? And mix them together. and I can decide when that loop's going to end just by using the crossfader to go to deck A. Okay, so creating custom loops is a great way to maybe extend your ideas a little bit further. This is where you can start getting a little bit more creative, but also making your own custom phrases. So sometimes if you find a song that is not very DJ friendly, what do I mean by DJ friendly? The intro is only 1 bar long for whatever reason and goes right into a vocal, or maybe it's only 2 bars long, or maybe there's no intro at all and you want to be able to blend it in with the next song and not have these vocals overlapping, have any sort of key clashing. Maybe you could find a section where it's just a breakdown or the instrumental part. Sometimes I will take the outro of one song and replace it with its intro just for DJing purposes. I can loop these tracks better together. So having custom loops like that can be very beneficial. But also going back to my original statement about inserting scenes. Now, when you look over here, when you look at scenes, you can actually play more than one track at a time, which is great. But when it comes to doing things like these follow actions that I set up earlier, I don't want them to reflect what's happening with these other tracks here. So I created empty scenes so they won't, for organization purposes, I can tell the difference between what these loops are for, and they are attached to this this audio stem versus these tracks. And how you can insert scenes is just by hitting Command I. Okay, Command I will allow you to insert scenes so you can actually create space between the tracks. And again, the reason why I did that, especially for these follow actions here, if I just hit play on this song, okay, you can see that. Okay, just create these quick little glitches. Okay, this is now, taking it a step further, but follow actions are really fun. And I'll show you what's going on under the hood here. So this loop here, I literally just grabbed one segment. Okay, and then on this one, you can see I said loop plus 12. I transposed it up 12 semitones. And then on this one, it says loop rev because I actually reversed it so it played backwards and it's playing towards the end of the track. So the other thing that's really important is about keeping in time. Again, if this was an in-person class, if you were here, we spend a whole day just going over follow actions, and especially with Ableton Live, there's some really cool new features, or Ableton Live 11, I mean. And if you're still in 10, that's fine too, because there's still quite a bit you can do with follow actions. But with follow actions, I can do these kind of fun, glitchy little patterns like this. And that's what you're hearing. It's just the cream original track, but then modulated and tweaked a little bit to make this fun little glitch pattern. Okay. And again, so that's, something just really fun to do, kind of like remixing on the fly. So really the only limitation is your imagination. There is so much you can do. Like this is me, I'm just literally, briefly breaking the surface here when it comes to chopping up the same loop with the same song. But imagine mixing and matching other samples, maybe some of your own musical works with other musical works, combining these things. It can be super fun, super fun. This is why I love DJing in Ableton as well, along with producing, obviously. Well, not obviously, but of course, I love producing in Ableton too. But so the last thing I just want to talk about before we leave today is MIDI mapping. Okay, so you might have noticed that sometimes I'm using my mouse to just click on these things, but I actually don't need to do that. And what do I mean? So if I go back to deck A, let me just demonstrate here. You'll see that I'm moving this. Okay, I'm moving it with my computer, or my MIDI controller. Okay, and with the crossfader, I have it pre-mapped to my keyboard as well. So there's a lot of customizations you can do here, and you can see I have it set with the return tracks as well for all these return tracks. Okay, and it's actually really easy to do. So if you come up here, let me just turn the keyboard off for a moment, where it says MIDI. Okay, you can click on this MIDI tab here in the upper right hand side, and this is for customizing using a MIDI controller. aka a external hardware device. So again, if you have like the Ableton 1 or Ableton 2 push series, you know exactly what I'm talking about. But maybe you have a third party controller that you want to custom MIDI map yourself. And by the way, the key command is Command M for that. But anything that you see highlighted in this bluish color is fair game, meaning that you can customize your keyboards or your hardware devices to map. And you can see right over here, the note/control is showing me which things that I MIDI map. So let me just demonstrate. Let's say because earlier I set up the phase flanger on a return track C, I could go ahead and now say, okay, I'm going to click on the send C for deck A, and then I'm going to bring my hands down to the knob, one of the free knobs that I have on my keyboard, and I'm just going to twist that knob just once like that, and now you can see that it popped up here, the phase flanger. And then I can hit Command M to get out of this, and now if I start twisting the knob, there it is. Okay, super intuitive, super easy. For some reason, if you are having a hard time with this though, there is some things that maybe your keyboard or your MIDI controller is not showing up. You can go to your preferences, and this is a really important section to understand and to know, and we talk about this in our Ableton classes, but under here, this is where you would see your control surface with the input and output controls, and then the MIDI ports for the in and outs with track sync and remote, and then with MPE for anyone who has Ableton 11. MPE is one of the newer MIDI functions that's really fun, but I'm not going to dive into that right now. But this is an important section, so you might need to access your controller, and you can see here Ableton's list just continues to grow with all these different types of controllers that I guarantee if you do have a controller like an APC 20 or APC 40, all of these different third-party controllers live here. Okay, so one last little tip that I want to give you is that, let's say if you want to do some customization with the volume control, one thing that I've noticed is that when I use something like here, let me just go ahead and MIDI map the volume control. Let's see if I use, so I'm just using my keyboard here. Okay, the one thing that so look, if I go to, I'm using my pitch wheel my mod wheel to use this for volume control. But if you notice, if I go all the way up, it goes past 0 dB, which can be an issue. That can cause unwanted distortion. The tracks will be inconsistent, especially if I'm trying to get it right at 0. So what you can do is when you're custom mapping this, go back, hit Command M, and then up where I have the track volume, you can set the minimal and maximum value. So I want this to be maxed out at 0 dB, and then minimal meaning negative infinite, so complete silence here. Okay, so when I do that, now when I adjust this, it won't, even if I bring my mod wheel all the way to the top here, as I push it up, it will only max out at 0 dB. Okay, it won't go past that. So that's really good to know, that you can actually customize the minimal and maximum values, and especially for effects, like let's say for your returns, for whatever reason, your sends and your returns, you don't want those to max out all the way, you can customize those as well. Okay, so again, this has just been a demonstration in using Ableton Live for DJing, and I want to thank you all for tuning in. But before we leave, I know my time is up here, I just want to point you to our website. So if you are interested learning more about one of our programs, whether that's DJing or Ableton or Logic or all these different courses that we offer here, currently at the recording of this video, if you type in edu.garnishmusicproduction.com, you can learn more about our live online courses, which are currently 33% off. And you can also learn more about one of our satellite schools from San Francisco. Shout out the SF team for making these streams possible, in Los Angeles to Nashville to Miami, Hong Kong, Berlin, London, and New York. We are all over the map, literally. And then here you can learn more about our programs, the 360 Academy to the Certified Producer programs, all the different classes from Ableton Live to Logic, FL Studios, Pro Tools, etc. And then we even have more creative, more specific type classes like hip hop production to electronic essentials, vocal production, theatrical, cinematic classes, and much more. So again, yeah, definitely check us out at edu.garnishmusicproduction.com, and stick around because we more. So
Oops.
again, yeah, I'm like listening to myself. Sorry. Again, you never know what's going to happen during these live streams. But yeah, we are doing these live streams, I think, every day. So same time, same place, but I will be back again and giving you more tips and tricks into the world of Ableton. So yeah, again, thank you everyone, and I hope you have a good day. Take care.